you so much on a Sunday to agree to talk to me. It's brilliant. I mean, this is my first. Annoushka Jewelry set up a book club for to help us through lockdown, and you're the very first book. So
oh, that's wonderful.
Thrilled.
Thank
well,
you.
It's a good way to start with a Booker Prize winner, isn't it? Good way to start. And I gather you're nominated for the Women's Award too, which we wish you lots of luck with.
Yes.
Yeah, very.
And just to say, your jewelry is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It's so quirky.
Well, we'll lend you some jewelry for any more when you get out of here for talks. You've been doing a lot of rounds with talks and interviews, and how have you enjoyed it? Because it must have been like, wow, what a whirlwind.
It's been a whirlwind. It hasn't really stopped because I'm having to do a lot of things remotely at the moment, which is fine. But yeah, the whirlwind began when I won the Booker, and up until lockdown, it was just crazy, but in a really good way, because I've been in this game a very long time. So if the press wants to interview me, to talk to me, to run features on me, to ask me to write for them, I'm saying yes to practically everything, because I so appreciate the fact that I'm in demand.
Oh, it's fantastic. But I mean, you're right. Sorry. That's all right. But I mean, this is your 8th book, isn't it? So
yes.
And the first time you were nominated for the Booker?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
you know,
well, I mean,
yeah, and so I just appreciate it. I appreciate every moment, and I've always kind of had the Booker in my sights, not as because that's the big career changer, that's the game changer, and so to suddenly have the prize has been just the most phenomenal experience for my career,
Yeah, no, I bet. But out of interest, you might not have had time to even think about this, but I know from my own experience of even just bringing out a new collection, when there's a successful collection, that's fantastic, absolutely thrilled. But there's no doubt that I feel a bit of pressure for the next collection. And I just wondered if you feel a bit of pressure now. You probably don't, you probably haven't even thought about it, but I just wondered.
Yeah, I'm not yet there where I'm working on a new novel yet. And what's great about this period in my life is that people are engaging with my backlist. So it's like the next book for a lot of my readers are actually books that have come and gone, that are still being published. But when I get to start writing a new book, then I will have that little voice in my ear telling me, they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it. But, I always have that anyway. And then I have to just kind of cancel it out and just get on with the writing. But sometimes it can take quite a while to cancel that voice out. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Obviously, having won the Booker with this voice in my head, it might get really noisy. I don't know, but I'm going to defeat it and just write the book I want to write.
Absolutely. And then, and actually, one of the things I'm longing to know, because I'm a jewelry designer, but I never trained to design jewelry. So my process is probably quite different to most jewelry designer process. I don't really know, but so I can design kind of from anywhere, because it's mainly in my head, because if you ask any of my team, my sketches are absolutely appalling, but it's so clear in my head. But I kind of do it from anywhere. And everyone said, oh, you must be, so creative during lockdown. Well, kind of, but that's just allowed me to do other things. But I'm just really interested in your process. I mean, really basic things like, as a writer, when you say, okay, I've got my idea, this is going to be my new book. How do you do it? Do you kind of get up in the morning, stay in your pajamas, get your coffee? Have you got a particular spot that you write in? All those kind of things.
Yeah, it's changed over the course of my life, my writing process. So when I was in my 20s, I would write very late at night, chain smoking and getting drunk. And I was writing poetry. And then I'd get into the zone and I'd write some terrible poem that the next day I would realize was terrible. But these days I work better in the morning, but I still get very distracted first thing in the morning. I try to read a book. That's the ideal in the first thing in the morning, but I obviously go onto social media, I read the news. Before I know it, 2 hours have passed and it's like I still haven't done any work. But then I'll get on with the work. I have a study, which is where I am now, and that's where most of the creative work takes place. And I will spend, it will be the main focus of my life until a book is completed. And Girl, Woman, Other took 5 years to complete. But I'm juggling lots of other things at the same time. So I'm also like professor of creative writing at university, and I judge prizes, and I'm a literary activist, and I go on tour. So I do all these other things, but the writing is the main thing that I'm working on. And I have to accept that this kind of balance is good for me. So I don't just sit at my desk 7 hours a day and write for so many years until the book's done. That won't work for me. It won't work for me. I'll drive myself nuts after a day.
And what about your agent and lovely Penguin? How do they deal with that? Because if you say to them, well, I can do it, but it might not be 5 years, how do they deal with that out of interest?
Well, they're used to it. They're used to it. You know, I'm obviously, my publisher would like me to produce something sooner, but I kind of think, I don't want to write another huge book for my next book. I want it to be a slim volume, right? I don't want it to be massive, and I want to produce it in less time. If I get a new book out in 3 years, I think that's good going. And also, I'd like Girl, Woman, Other to settle. Do you know what I mean? I want people to be hungry for the next book, rather than me producing a book, say, next year, and people making a very direct comparison very quickly between that and the new work. So I feel
get that.
I won't rush it, but I won't take 5 years either.
But will you be, my cousin, Frances, she's called Frances Donor-Saunders, she writes, and she writes beautifully, but she finds it quite, it's quite an ordeal in one way. I mean, she loves it, but I didn't see her for months. I mean, literally for months. It's like, where have you gone? And she said, no, I've got another, 10,000 words to write or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And she finds it, quite a painful process in one respect. And I just wondered, do you find it like that, or do you find it exciting and exhilarating?
The latter, for sure, the latter. Years ago, I did find it a painful process. And these days, I find it much more exhilarating. Although there are different stages to the writing process. So, often when I'm writing, the first draft is very exciting. It gets done quite, let me just try and set this up properly. It gets done quite quickly. And then it's the editing. And sometimes the editing can be quite painful, because that's when I'm trying to make it the best that it can be. So there's the first creative impulse, which perhaps like you, it's with your drawings or the idea. And then it's the actual technical craft of polishing it up and making it as good as it can be. And that can be frustrating. But generally speaking, it's something, for me, the creative process, I'm hungry for it. I enjoy it. I love losing myself in it. And I am excited by the work. And I feel if I'm not excited by the work, then I shouldn't be doing it.
Okay, that's so interesting. Okay, so I know that somebody's going to ask a question, but I desperately want to know. Can you just talk me through the lack of full stops and the way you wrote it? I'm just really interested to know, did you write it like that, or did you go back and rewrite it like that? And why did you write it like that?
Yes, I wrote it like that. And I got an email from somebody a couple of weeks ago who had ordered it on Kindle from Amazon. And they sent me a letter complaining that there were no full stops, and that it was outrageous, and that they tried to contact Amazon, but they couldn't get hold of Amazon to tell them. I haven't replied yet.
That is hilarious. God, can you publish your reply? Because I think everyone would quite like to see your reply.
Well, I'm quite tempted to put it out there on Twitter.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah. So it was, for me, the absence of full stops made it very free-flowing as a writing experience. It just allowed me to do all kinds of things with the novel. Because, there are these 12 primarily Black British women, and I tell their lives in 30 pages. And that's very hard to do, but I think I was able to do it because I used almost a sort of poetry, technique in order to say a lot in a few words. And that absence of full stops allowed me to do that. And then that's also was a problem when I was editing, because I realized why we have full stops.
Yes.
So it's like, I need sentences. This is really hard to edit. It's like editing like some big impressionist painting, and you just don't know where to start with it. It was a bit like that.
Well, particularly if you didn't lay it out, I mean, you know, the way it's laid out in the book, for those of you that have, you know, it's very clear. So actually, it's fine. But I guess in the edit, if you're just writing on a computer, did you lay it out the way it's laid out in the book?
I did.
Oh, you did.
But then I changed quite a lot of the layout as I was editing it for clarity, because I wanted it, because it's an experimental novel essentially. And what I find really interesting is that a lot of people are reading this book because I won the Booker. So it's like the barrier they had to reading an experimental book of this kind has gone. And they find they just get into it. And they don't even mention the fact that it's kind of experimental. And I love that. They're just in the story.
That's so interesting. Well, I can see someone's just put up how much they love the free verse. Can you see it? Coming along. I've got to put my glass on to be able to read what's going on there. But the other thing I wanted to ask you is, as you're writing, do you have a reader in mind? That's my first question.
No. Because I find if I have a reader in mind, then I start writing for them. And I don't want to write for anybody. I want to write for a readership. But I can't be specific about what that readership might look like. And in fact, we know in this country that the majority of readers are middle-aged women. You know, that's the truth. So what I'm doing is I'm writing the story I want to write. I'm trying to stay true to the experience of the characters and everything else, aware that there's a readership, but not thinking of a specific readership, because I want to be completely free with it. And also, when you publish a book, you don't know where it's going to land. So this book has landed very well, but I didn't know that, you know, I get letters from like old white guys in their 80s saying how much they enjoyed the book. And I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. So I think that you can limit the work as a writer of fiction if I start to think about a readership. It's different though if you're creating jewelry, I think, because you're talking about markets, aren't you? And that's different.
Well, kind of, but actually it's funny you say that, because actually when I create a piece of jewelry, I think about myself really, because if I don't want to wear it myself, I can't really visualize that other people will want to wear it. But having said that, you know, our clients are kind of, you know, they can be from 25 to 95, and it's just how they wear it very differently. So actually, I think there are quite a lot of parallels with that, which I hadn't kind of really thought of, because you never, exactly as you said, you never quite know who's going to receive this piece of jewelry and what it might mean to them. So that's really interesting. But I do, but the other thing in my kind of process is I do ask other people what they think as I'm going. That doesn't necessarily mean I listen to what they think. But in your case, will you write, you know, will you have written a chapter about Boomi or somebody and sent it to a friend or somebody you respect, not your agent, not Penguin, but would you have sent it to somebody and said, how's this, what do you think?
Yes, different books I work differently. So with this book, I wrote quite a lot of it before I sent it to a reader. I think I'd gone through like 2 drafts, and then I sent it to a reader for feedback. And the feedback I got was, well, it's readable.
Oh, great. You want to slit your wrists at that point.
Yeah. And also, my husband reads some of my work in progress, and I was reading some of it out to him, and he was a bit off about it, so I didn't show him anymore. You have to, he's a very good critic. He's extremely good. But so with this book, I knew that I had to get as much of it done as possible before I got feedback on it, because I knew that I was the only person who had a vision of what it could be. And I just want, when somebody gives me feedback, I want them to see what I can't see in terms of what needs to be done. And so I need to have developed it as far as I can develop it before I hand it over. And then I have there are probably about 10 people in my life who are in the literature industry who I might send, or even some of them aren't actually, who are readers, who I might send my work to at various stages and say, be totally honest, what do you think? What do you get from this? And then like you, I'll take some of it on board and some of it I won't take on board.
Yeah, and then I have to go and say, well, I know, no, I heard it, so I'm just taking it I'm taking a different view, you
Yeah, yeah.
know. But as you're writing and combining, you know, your roles at university and all the other things that you do you have kind of do you set yourself milestones where you're like, okay, I've done 4 out of the 12 women. Now I'm going to treat myself to, I don't know, well, perhaps a holiday at some point or whatever. Well, you know, but do you do that or do you not do
Not
that?
really, not really. It's kind of, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And then the point at which I treat myself is probably when my publisher says, yes, you'll publish it. And then the bubbly comes out.
Okay.
But until that point, I just continue. I don't actually, I don't really go on holiday even. Haven't done for decades almost. I just work all the time, but I love what I do. And I travel for work, which is different.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm in the UK all the time.
Yeah. No, I mean that I mean we're so lucky to love what we do. I absolutely love what I do.
Yeah.
I can't imagine not doing it. You know, my kids often say, for goodness sake, you're going to stop. And I think, actually, I don't know what I'd do otherwise. It's just
something until you die, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, no, it is. So how about lockdown? How's that? Well, I guess, as you said at the beginning, you spent a lot of time doing things like this or Zoom.
Yes.
Have you done a lot of Zoom calls?
I've done, I really hadn't heard of Zoom until lockdown, and now I've become quite expert in it. And I've done lots of media things, and they all require different apps and different technology, and I'm a technophobe. So
me too.
Yes, I spent some time trying to stay on top of this technology because this may be the future for at least for a while. I've been fulfilling little writing commissions. That's what I've been doing, and my filing and my accounts, and just very, very busy. You know, the only difference is
writing. Sorry to interrupt. Writing commissions. What kind of things would those be?
Okay, so I was asked to write a short story for Vogue, which I did, which I absolutely, I loved it. I love these commissions because I always experiment and I do something I wouldn't necessarily write. I don't write short stories unless I'm commissioned to write them. I wrote a short story for the New Statesman, and then I wrote a monologue for Front Row Late with Mary Beard, which was broadcast on Thursday. And they wanted me to write something around lockdown. And I wrote a monologue in the voice of COVID-19. So it was from the perspective of the virus, which was
interesting.
Quite risky and edgy, but I think it went down quite well.
So where do we find that? Tell me again where we get that.
On BBC Two iPlayer.
Okay, guys, I definitely want to read that.
On Thursday. Yeah. So those are the sorts of things that have been sort of bubbling away, and I like it because I can write a short story in a few hours actually. So it's complete. The work is very complete when there are these short commissions.
Yeah, that must be really fun, actually. It's less stress.
It is. Yes.
Now, look, I don't know whether you can see some of these questions, but I've got a couple. So Flavia wants to know which is your favourite character?
Yes. I do like Yaz, the 19-year-old woke university student, because I find her very entertaining. She always makes me laugh. And I like Hattie, the 93-year-old farmer, because I think she's formidable and she's such an unusual figure in fiction. And then I like Amma, who is loosely based on my younger self. She's the only character where there's a little bit of autobiography. And yeah, I like all of them in different ways, but those characters kind of stand out for me. And
so go on, sorry.
Yeah, the readers tend to mention Bumi as a character that they really kind of feel a lot for, I guess.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I was going to ask you if any of them are autobiographical. So because you were involved in the theatre much earlier, weren't you?
Yes. And I was a theatre director, and that's where I came up. But by the end of my 20s, I left theatre behind, where she's somebody who's still working in theatre.
Yeah. And was it always your intention at the end to bring all these characters together in the theatre?
No. No.
That just happened.
Yes. So I don't really plot ahead. I might have
really?
I have an idea, and then the story evolves, you know. And as it evolved, I realized that if I didn't bring most of them together at the end, it might be a bit too fragmented. I had to find some way to almost finish off the book with most of these characters interacting in some way. So that's when, at some point, I got the idea for the theatre, the after show for the theatre production at the National Theatre. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Okay, and now Lucia wants to know, she says you've got a recurring theme is women feeling worthless and unloved. Many of them settling for the first person who shows them an interest, whether this is in terms of sex or marriage. Do you think this is a universal feeling among women in a patriarchal society, or do you think other factors are at play?
Oh,
this is Lucia's question, I hasten to add.
That's so interesting, because nobody's raised that as an idea before. So I don't know if I actually agree with the idea that they all fall for settle for the first person they come across, although I think maybe some of them do. I think the book explores relationships in lots of different ways, you know. So there are straight relationships and queer relationships, there are marriages, there are partnerships, and you know, I think I'm just exploring multiples in the book, all the different ways in which these women might be leading their lives. And I think some of them do feel, you know, are lacking in confidence, and some of them do have, I guess, I wouldn't say worthless. I wouldn't even say that they're settling. I'm just trying to think of which character settles. Yeah, I don't know, actually. I like to think that the women have agency, that they make choices. And in some cases, they've made choices to go with the first person that they've met. So, for example, you know, I've got Winsome, who is a woman from the Windrush generation, who marries Clovis. But I think in those days, you probably didn't have this kind of multiple dating that is definitely prevalent now since the internet. Do you know what I mean? It's like you just date. We're talking about the 50s here. And it was
particularly having just arrived.
So there wasn't a lot of choice. And here's a Caribbean man from her island. He shows an interest in her, and they get together. And I think it's probably that was much truer of the time. And it's probably for younger people, it might be hard to imagine what it was like before online dating, when there were so many possibilities and opportunities. There just weren't that many then, and it was frowned on anyway. If you were a woman who was always dating lots of different men, you were considered, immoral and a tart and the rest of it, or whatever they call people then. But I think the book is looking at the sort of consequences of patriarchal society. I mean, that runs throughout the whole of the book.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'm just trying to see. So I can't see who it is, but somebody, can you see that? Have you ever written anything that your publisher said no to?
Yeah, no, I haven't actually. But I've been with 3 publishers in this country. And I got with Hamish Hamilton Penguin 20 odd years ago. And he has taken every book I've published since, which has been amazing. And, you know, what's interesting about my editor, Simon Prosser, is that, you know, Penguin's a big, you know, multinational company, obviously very financially, economically successful. But he is a small literary imprint with some very heavy hitters. He publishes Zadie Smith and Ali Smith and Marlon James and Arundhati Roy and loads of big hitters. And he has continued to publish me, even though I didn't become a big hitter until this book. And I think that's really interesting. So he invested in my work, even though I wasn't making the publishing house much money, because he gets my work and appreciates it. And because of that, continued to publish me.
Well, isn't that wonderful that you've won the Booker Prize for him? So somebody's just asking, do you think the Booker Prize will change your career?
It has changed my career in every way imaginable. It changed it overnight. Everything that I could hope for happened.
And were you prepared for that change? I mean, did you have any idea that
no,
you would
I had
be?
no idea. I had no idea.
Really?
I had lots of wishful thinking, but I had no idea. And I think as time goes on, I realize how important that prize is. I don't think you realize until you win it that it just changes everything. It changes how you're seen. It changes the international markets wanting to publish you. It changes film rights and television rights. It changes book sales, which just went through the roof. And changes the level of kind of my positioning as a writer in society. So before the book, I would appear at festivals and things, and I wouldn't be seen as a headline event. And then immediately after, I'm considered to be a headliner or the headliner. And so that still entertains me. So it'll be Bernardine Evaristo and Hilary Mantel, you know.
Yeah, I mean, how cool is that?
Well,
I have to say, I feel very honoured that you've taken the time to talk to me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. I've got one question. So for everybody who's watching, what book should we be reading next?
Okay. I'd like to talk about a book by a writer called Monique Roffey, who has had a successful career as a novelist. I think this is her 6th book. It was published about 3 weeks ago. So any writer publishing at the moment, you know, my heart goes out to them, because obviously the bookshops are shut and it's quite hard to get hold of some books. She has written a book about a mermaid in the Caribbean, but it's about so much more than a mermaid. And it's, to me, reading it, it's such an amazing book that it feels like a classic, even though it's just been published. And it's about a mermaid who is hunted down by some seamen and ends up on this Caribbean island. And the mermaid is Amerindian and actually thousands of years old. And it's about what happens to her on this island. And it's also a kind of love story. And if anyone's put off by the idea of mermaids or, you know, whatever, just give this book a chance, because I guarantee you, as soon as you start reading it, you're going to find it quite an incredible and extraordinary read. And I just want it to do well, because I think a lot of people are going to relate to it, because even though it's about a mermaid, it's about women. It's about women in this society. It is about the patriarchy. It is about misogyny. And it's just a really incredible read.
Oh, good. Okay, well, that's fantastic. You better go and look online and look at my lovely mermaid charm, which I've done a long time ago with the Vampire's Wife. Yes. So have a look. But I think we're probably out of time.
Okay.
But thank you so much.
You're
really
welcome.
Lovely to talk to you. I'm glad we managed to get the tech bit sorted.
Yes. And good to talk to you too. Yes.
Yeah, you
and
too.
everybody else out there.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Lovely to see you.
Okay. Stay safe.